July 2018. Qatar Hospitality paid $600 million for the Plaza Hotel in New York City. The Qatari government fund was buying the most famous hotel in America, and they were buying it from an Indian conglomerate whose chairman was sitting in a New Delhi jail cell for fraud. The hotel was losing $10 million a year. Before the Indians, there had been Israelis who gutted the building and converted half of it into condominiums. Before them, a partnership between Singapore and Saudi Arabia that collapsed after September 11th. Before them, Donald Trump, who lost $83 million in 7 years. The pattern was clear by 2018. The Plaza Hotel destroys everyone who tries to own it. Bernhard Beinecke built it in 1907. He died in his apartment there 25 years later. Harry Black financed the construction and lived on the 18th floor. He killed himself. Conrad Hilton bought it and made money, then sold it before it could ruin him. Every owner since has walked away broken, bankrupt, or forced out by creditors. This is not a story about preservation triumphs or restoration miracles. This is the story of the world's most elegant hotel and how it came to consume the fortunes of everyone who believed they could possess it. Before the Qataris, before Trump, before anyone understood what the plaza would cost them, there were 3 men who believed they could build something that would last forever. Before we trace the rise and fall of America's most dangerous hotel investment, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by the hidden tragedies behind American luxury, subscribe so you don't miss our next story. Now, let's travel back to 1865 to a German village and meet the butcher's son who started everything. Elberfeld, Germany, 1865. Johann Bernhard George Beinecke was 19 years old when he left for New York, and he carried nothing anyone would want. His father was a butcher in a village near Wuppertal in the German states. The family had no money, no connections. Nothing that suggested the boy boarding a ship for America would die owning more real estate than anyone in New York City. He arrived through Castle Garden that spring with empty pockets. Some immigrants came with skills. Beinecke came with the ability to work until his hands bled and a talent for understanding what things were worth. Within weeks, he found work as a wagon driver for a meat concern on the waterfront. He hauled animal carcasses through Manhattan streets, learning the routes, learning the customers, learning which hotels paid on time and which butchers cut corners on quality. The work was brutal. The pay was barely enough to survive. But Beinecke was learning the infrastructure of a city that ran on commerce. What he understood was this: the man who owned the wagon made more than the man who drove it. Within a few years, Beinecke bought the company. The transaction was simple. The owner wanted out. Beinecke wanted in. The price was everything he had saved, plus what he could borrow from other German immigrants who had watched him work. He renamed the business Beinecke and Company and began expanding through the city's meatpacking industry. He worked longer hours than his competitors. He extended credit when others demanded cash. Hotel operators who could not pay their meat bills in January remembered who had kept them supplied, and they rewarded him with contracts when business improved in spring. Beinecke understood leverage before he knew the word. The hotels needed him. That dependency was worth more than immediate payment. On April 12, 1875, Beinecke married Johanna Elizabeth Weigel at the German Evangelical Presbyterian Church on Manhattan's Lower East Side. She was the daughter of another German immigrant family. They would celebrate their golden wedding anniversary 50 years later. Still together, still in New York. Johanna managed the household while Bernhard expanded the business. By 1890, Beinecke and Company had merged with 2 rival firms, Ottman and Company and T.C. Eastman Company Limited. The consolidation gave Beinecke control of New York City's largest stockyard, located at 59th Street and the Hudson River. Cattle cars from the west rolled down 12th Avenue and were shunted into his yards. The steam locomotives were encased so they would not frighten the horses still pulling carriages through the city. England, Scotland, and Wales were getting much of their meat from the United States, and Beinecke was shipping it to them. He had become an international financier without ever intending to leave the meat business. While delivering to the city's hotels, Beinecke noticed something his competitors missed. Hotels needed meat every day. He controlled the meat supply. The hotels made fortunes housing the people who bought the meat. The profit margins were better in hospitality than in wholesale meat. The logic was simple. He should own the hotels. In 1890, the first Plaza Hotel was under construction at Fifth Avenue and the southeastern corner of Central Park. The builders had run out of money before completion. The New York Life Insurance Company foreclosed on the project and hired the architectural firm McKim, Mead and White to finish what the original developers had started. Beinecke purchased the unfinished building. He saw what others had abandoned and understood what it could become. The location was perfect. The park guaranteed that nothing would ever obstruct the view to the north. Wealthy families were building mansions along Fifth Avenue, and they needed a place to house their guests and extended family members. The first Plaza Hotel opened on October 1st, 1892. After the architectural firm had spent years completing what the original builders could not, it became profitable almost immediately. Beinecke understood that location determined everything. The corner of Fifth Avenue and Central Park South would only increase in value as Manhattan grew. Beinecke formed the Hammond Hotel Company and began acquiring other properties: the Murray Hill Hotel, the Old Shoreham in Washington, the Hygeia Hotel at Old Point Comfort in Virginia, the Essex Hotel in Boston. He built the Manhattan Hotel in 1896 at the northwest corner of Madison Avenue and 42nd Street. He raised money to build the 1,000-room Terminal Hotel at Broadway and 32nd Street. Each investment proved the same principle. Location mattered more than the building. Buildings could be replaced. Location was permanent. The Terminal Hotel cost a fortune to build, but the land beneath it would outlast any structure. By 1905, the first plaza was too small. New York had grown northward faster than anyone predicted. The population was surging. Millionaires were multiplying. The hotel that had seemed enormous in 1892 now looked modest compared to the new palaces rising along Fifth Avenue. The Waldorf Astoria had set a new standard. The St. Regis had opened. The competition was building bigger and more elaborate. Beinecke owned the most valuable hotel site in Manhattan. But the building sitting on it could not accommodate the demand. Guests were being turned away. The location was perfect. The structure had to go. Beinecke had the money to rebuild. His meatpacking fortune, combined with his hotel profits, gave him the capital. But money alone would not be enough. He needed partners who understood construction at the scale he envisioned. And he needed a manager who could operate a luxury hotel that would compete with anything in Europe. The first partner came from Canada. Harry St. Francis Black was born in Cobourg, Ontario, in 1863. The son of a British Army officer from Belfast who had settled in Canada in 1834. The family was originally from Ireland. Black went to New York as a young man with no training in architecture or engineering. What he had was charm and ambition and enough confidence to marry the daughter of the most successful builder in America. In 1894, Black married Allen May Fuller. Her father, George A. Fuller, had founded the George A. Fuller Company in 1882, which had pioneered the modern concept of the general contractor. Fuller's firm was different from the architecture practices of the time. It handled every aspect of construction except the design itself, which came from outside architects. Fuller built the Chicago Opera House, the Rookery Building, the Monadnock Building, structures that were defining the American skyline. Despite his son-in-law's complete lack of technical credentials, Fuller made Black a vice president. The decision baffled Fuller's colleagues but proved prescient. George Fuller died in December 1900 from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. His estate was valued at $3 million. Harry Black became president of the Fuller Company at age 37. He inherited a firm with offices in New York, Chicago, Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Washington, and Pittsburgh. Black proved to be a natural salesman and dealmaker, even if he could not read architectural drawings or understand engineering calculations. 2 years later, Black took the company public and merged it with Alliance and New York Realty to create the United States Realty and Construction Company, valued at $66 million. The board of directors included Cornelius Vanderbilt and steel magnate Charles Schwab. Henry Morgenthau, who had become ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, served on the board. James Spire, a prominent banker, was involved. Newspapers called Black the world's greatest landlord. Black understood construction on a scale that terrified more conservative builders. The Fuller Company would build the Flatiron Building in 1902, the New York Times Building in 1905, Macy's Herald Square in 1902. Pennsylvania Station would open in 1910, one of the grandest railway terminals ever built. Under Black's direction, the company would construct the Lincoln Memorial, completed between 1914 and 1922, the Arlington Memorial Amphitheater, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, the Freer Gallery of Art. Black thought in monuments, in structures that would define cities and commemorate nations. When Beinecke approached him about rebuilding the plaza, Black saw an opportunity to create the finest hotel in America. Not just profitable, legendary. The third partner understood luxury hospitality better than anyone in the country. Frederick Sterry was born in Lansingburgh, New York, in 1866. He was raised in Albany, where his father, Edwin S. Sterry, was the city's leading photographer. Fred started working at the United States Hotel in Saratoga Springs, the prestigious spa and racing center where the rich, the fashionable, and the sporting element gathered every August. The contacts he made there would serve him for the rest of his career. The Vanderbilts summered in Saratoga, the Whitneys, the Belmonts. They remembered the young manager who ensured their comfort. By age 27, Sterry was managing director of the Homestead Hotel at Virginia Hot Springs, one of the most exclusive resorts in America. Under his management, it achieved top rank among the country's resort hotels. His skillful direction caught the attention of Henry Morrison Flagler, one of John D. Rockefeller's original associates in organizing Standard Oil. Flagler had become one of the wealthiest men in America through oil, and he was using that fortune to develop Florida into a winter retreat for the northeastern elite. Henry Flagler recruited Sterry to manage his Florida properties. Sterry managed the Royal Poinciana Hotel in Palm Beach, which became the largest wooden structure in the world and could accommodate over 1,000 guests. He also oversaw the Breakers, another Flagler property on the Atlantic Ocean. In Palm Beach, Sterry learned to serve the Vanderbilts, the Goulds, the Gates family. He hosted their winter carnivals with boat races and parades. He organized formal affairs like the Washington's birthday ball. Flagler kept a photograph of Sterry's daughters on his desk and called them his dear little ones. He helped fund their education. The relationship between hotelier and hotel manager became almost familial. Sterry knew what wealthy guests expected because he had served them breakfast, arranged their entertainment, handled their complaints, and ensured their privacy. He understood that luxury was not just about marble and crystal. It was about anticipating needs before guests articulated them. It was about creating an environment where the richest people in America felt they were being treated as they deserved. That knowledge was worth more than architectural drawings. In 1905, the three men formed a partnership. Beinecke provided the capital and the land. Black provided the construction expertise and the Fuller Company's resources. Sterry would manage the hotel once it opened and advise on design decisions that would affect operations. They purchased the 15-year-old plaza that June and immediately began demolition. The old hotel came down in sections. By August, the site was cleared and ready for construction. The partnership moved quickly. They knew that every month of delay was revenue lost. They hired the man who had built the Dakota Apartments, the Waldorf, the Astoria. Henry Janeway Hardenberg knew how to design for millionaires because he had been designing their homes and hotels for 30 years. He had been born in New Brunswick, New Jersey on February 6, 1847. The son of a Dutch family that traced its American roots back generations. His great-great-grandfather had been the first president of Rutgers College when it was still called Queens College. After apprenticing under architect Detlef Lenau from 1865 to 1870, Hardenberg opened his own practice in 1870 and designed buildings that looked like they belonged in Europe, not the raw American cities that were still being carved from wilderness. The Dakota Apartments, completed in 1884, resembled a German Renaissance fortress transplanted to the Upper West Side. The name itself came from the perception that the location was so far north of the developed city that it might as well be in the Dakota Territory. The Waldorf Hotel, completed in 1893, was designed in the Edwardian style for William Waldorf Astor. The Astoria Hotel, completed in 1897, joined it 4 years later. Together they became the Waldorf Astoria. the hotel that set the standard for luxury in America until it was demolished in 1929 to make way for the Empire State Building. For the plaza, Hardenberg chose French Renaissance chateau style. He designed it to look like a castle that might overlook the Loire Valley, adapted for a city corner at the edge of Central Park. White brick and marble rising 18 stories above Central Park. A mansard roof with dormer windows that broke the roofline and added visual interest. Rounded corners on the northeastern and southeastern elevations that resembled turrets, giving the impression of a fortified residence despite being a commercial hotel. The design emphasized both grandeur and fireproof construction. Steel frame superstructure with hollow tile floors. Wired glass enclosures around all stairways and elevators to contain fires. After the hotel fires that had devastated other properties, Hardenberg and Black were determined to build something that could survive. The facade was articulated in 3 horizontal sections, like the components of a classical column: base, shaft, and crown. The base rose 3 stories in marble, with the lowest 2 stories rusticated to provide a robust foundation visually. Ohio buff-colored limestone covered the first floors. White brick clad the upper stories, trimmed with terracotta detailing that added texture without overwhelming the composition. The northern elevation faced Central Park. The eastern elevation faced Fifth Avenue. Both were designed to be photographed, to be admired from multiple angles, to present well in the newspapers that would document society events. Construction began in June 1905 and would take 27 months. The developers originally budgeted $8.5 million. They anticipated that the hotel would be expensive, but they believed the budget was adequate. Midway through construction, they realized they had underestimated the costs. They needed $4 million more. The steel alone was more expensive than projected. The custom millwork ran over budget. The imported materials required chartering ships. The final cost reached $12.5 million, an unprecedented sum that made it one of the most expensive buildings in New York. To pay for it, they secured a $5 million loan in mid-1906 from a consortium of banks, followed by another $4.5 million in 1907. Everything was custom-made. Fred Sterry was dispatched to Europe to purchase furnishings because American manufacturers could not supply what the plaza required at the quality level demanded. Where manufacturers could not supply what the plaza needed, the developers chartered ships to import materials from England, France, and Italy. 1,650 crystal chandeliers were ordered. The largest single order in history for gold-encrusted china went to L. Strauss & Sons. The Pooley Company of Philadelphia manufactured the furniture to specifications Sterry provided. Irish linen for the tables, Baccarat crystal from France for the glassware, marble mantles from Italy for the fireplaces, English oak panels for the walls. Sheffield silver hardware on the doors. Every fixture was custom designed for specific locations within the building. The Atlantic Terracotta Company and brick contractor Pfotenhauer and Nesbitt worked on the facade under the supervision of Fuller Company engineers. William Baumgarten and Company decorated the Edwardian room with fabrics and furniture selected to create a men's club atmosphere. E. Spencer Hall and Company handled the Palm Court, the restaurant that Sterry envisioned as the hotel's social center. The caryatids came from Pottier and Stymus, craftsmen who specialized in classical sculptural elements. A Winslow Brothers company created the column capitals, the metal moldings, and the wreaths inset into the floor. McNulty Brothers of Chicago did the ceiling and stucco work, creating the ornate plasterwork that would define the public spaces. Sterry recalled years later that all the interior features were custom designed for the hotel. There was not a stock item in the building. Everything, he said, was specially made and specially fitted for a purpose. He would venture to say there was not a stock thing anywhere in the structure. The claim was not an exaggeration. Even the doorknobs were cast specifically for the plaza. The hotel contained 753 rooms designed to accommodate 550 guests. The calculation assumed that over half would be permanent residents who would occupy their suites year-round. 5 marble staircases led from the ground floor to all other floors, though most guests would use the elevators that ran in wired glass shafts. The stories above the ground floor surrounded a large interior courtyard that provided light and air to interior rooms. The basement contained a grill room for informal dining, a kitchen that could produce meals for hundreds of guests simultaneously, refrigeration rooms for storing meat and produce, a Victorian-style Turkish bath for relaxation, and a barber shop. Laundry rooms occupied space in the basement and on the 18th floor, where the staff could wash and press linens without disturbing guests. October 1st, 1907. Alfred Gwynne Vanderbilt was the first guest to sign the register in the morning. The plaza was designed primarily as a residence for wealthy New Yorkers, and the Vanderbilts understood the statement that occupancy made. Single rooms started at $2.50 per night for transient guests, but the permanent residents would pay far more for their suites. George Gates, the gambler known as Bet a Million Gates for his willingness to wager enormous sums, took a suite. George J. Gould, the railroad magnate, took another. Colonel William J. moved in. The hotel that Beinecke, Black, and Sterry had built to last forever opened to newspaper reviews calling it the greatest hotel in the world. Within months, over half the rooms were occupied by permanent residents. The strategy was working. The wealthy wanted to live at the plaza, not just visit. The Palm Court could seat 350 guests for afternoon tea, and it became immensely popular. The room featured a stained glass ceiling that filtered natural light, creating an ethereal atmosphere. The caryatids supported the ceiling on their shoulders like classical goddesses. The floor contained mosaic tile work with geometric patterns. Tea service began at 4 o'clock each afternoon and continued until 7. In January 1908, an incident occurred that demonstrated the plaza's social power. Gladys Vanderbilt accepted Count Laszlo Széchenyi's marriage proposal in the Palm Court. The engagement was significant enough, but what happened the next day revealed the hotel's pull. Vanderbilt and Széchenyi, along with another engaged couple, Theodora Schantz and the Duc de Chaulnes, had tea in the Palm Court at 4 o'clock. The New York Times reported that within half an hour, the corridors were impassable. Over 3,000 people arrived to have tea, hoping to catch a glimpse of the engaged couples. The crowd overwhelmed the space. Fred Sterry had to open the men's-only Edwardian room and grill room in the basement to handle the overflow. Women were admitted to the normally restricted space because there was nowhere else to put them. The Palm Court became the most sought-after reservation in New York. To be seen there meant something. To be excluded meant more. The hotel established rituals that defined New York society. George M. Cohan, the actor, composer, and playwright, reserved a booth in what would later become the Oak Room. From 4 until 7 every afternoon, Cohan sat in the northwest corner booth having pre-theater cocktails before the curtain went up on Broadway. The plaza was only 10 minutes from the theater district, making it a convenient place for him to unwind before evening performances. After his death in the early 1940s, the Lambs Club, a theatrical organization, installed a bronze plaque above his booth that read, "Here in this corner where he spent many happy hours, the Lambs have erected this tablet to the memory of George M. Cohan." The corner was officially named the Cohan Corner by Conrad Hilton, who owned the hotel at the time. Cohan was the only person to receive a permanent monument inside the plaza, a recognition of his daily presence and his contribution to American theater. Ernest Hemingway once advised F. Scott Fitzgerald to give his liver to Princeton and his heart to the plaza. Fitzgerald took the suggestion to heart. He would later set key scenes from The Great Gatsby at the hotel, including the confrontation between Gatsby, Tom Buchanan, and Daisy in a suite on a sweltering summer day. The plaza appears throughout American literature as a symbol of arrival, of having made it in New York. Theodore Roosevelt moved Republican Party events to the plaza from the Fifth Avenue Hotel after that older establishment closed. As the 26th president, Roosevelt understood the importance of venue. The plaza conveyed power and permanence. Franklin D. Roosevelt, Theodore's distant cousin, held his birthday luncheon in the Palm Court in 1935. William Howard Taft stayed there. Harry S. Truman, Richard Nixon. Presidents, kings, ambassadors, stars of stage, screen, and sports stayed at the plaza. The hotel kept a collection of national flags so that an appropriate one could be displayed whenever a foreign head of state visited. The phrase circulated among staff and guests alike. Nothing unimportant ever happens at the plaza. Between 1919 and 1921, architects Warren and Wetmore designed an addition that nearly doubled the hotel's size. The firm had designed Grand Central Terminal, and they understood how to create spaces that handled large crowds while maintaining elegance. A 300-room annex rose on the 58th Street side. A new Fifth Avenue lobby was created with an entrance that featured 6 Tuscan columns supporting a balustraded balcony. The Terrace Room, a new restaurant and ballroom, opened on October 3, 1921. The expansion maintained Hardenberg's original design aesthetic while adding capacity to meet continued demand. The plaza could now accommodate over 1,000 guests when fully occupied. The hotel made money. The permanent residents paid their leases on time. The restaurant generated substantial revenue from both hotel guests and outside diners who came specifically for the Palm Court experience. The banquet bookings filled the calendar months in advance. Weddings, corporate dinners, political, fundraisers, charity balls. The plaza hosted them all, and Harry Black, living on the 18th floor in a penthouse apartment, was falling apart. By the late 1920s, Black was being accused of bootlegging. Prohibition, which began in January 1920, had forced changes throughout the hotel industry. At the plaza, the changes were particularly visible. The Champagne Porch, an outdoor cafe on the Fifth Avenue side where society ladies had sipped champagne while watching carriages pass, had to close. It could not serve ginger ale and elderberry juice in a space so visible from the street. The visual association with alcohol consumption was too strong. Fred Sterry, who had managed the hotel since opening day, converted the area into the Terrace Room, which was not directly accessible from the street and could only be entered by traversing the Fifth Avenue lobby. The architectural change allowed the hotel to maintain control over who entered and what they consumed. The men's bar closed and would later, after Prohibition ended, become the Oak Room. Black's marriage to Alon Fuller had ended in divorce. The details were kept private, as divorces among the wealthy often were, but the split was final. He remarried Isabel Louise May, the daughter of Henry May and Isabel Teresa Coleman, but his personal life was unraveling despite the new marriage. Legal problems mounted. Business associates whispered about his behavior. The bootlegging accusations, whether true or not, damaged his reputation. The man who had built the Flatiron Building in Pennsylvania Station, who had been called the world's greatest landlord, who lived in a penthouse at the hotel he had helped create, was found dead on July 19th, 1930. Harry St. Francis Black committed suicide. He was 66 years old. The newspapers reported his death with the discretion afforded to prominent men, noting his accomplishments and his charitable work rather than dwelling on the circumstances. He left behind the Harry S. Black and Alon Fuller Fund, a charity for the relief of unfortunate men, women, and children, either sick or physically disabled. The fund is still administered by the Bank of America today, distributing grants to organizations including Disabilities Rights Advocates New York, Care for the Homeless, and the American Civil Liberties Union. Black's charitable legacy outlasted his life. December 20th, 1932. Bernhard Beinecke died in his apartment at the Plaza Hotel after several weeks of illness. He was 86 years old. The New York Times published a lengthy obituary documenting his rise from German immigrant to hotel magnate. He left his wife, Johanna Weigel, with whom he had celebrated their golden wedding anniversary 7 years earlier in the same hotel where they now lived. He left 4 sons, Edwin J., who had become president of the Sperry and Hutchinson Company, the S&H Green Stamps empire, that would become a household name across America. Frederick W., Walter, and Bernard Jr., who lived in California. He left 2 daughters, one of whom had married and returned to Leipzig, Germany. The immigrant who had driven a meat wagon in 1865 owned hotels, stockyards, and banks when he died. He had been chairman of the Plaza Bank, one of the original directors. He had served as president and chairman of the Commonwealth Bank before it merged with the Manufacturers Trust Company. The Plaza Hotel was his monument, and he died inside it, in the apartment he had occupied for years, surrounded by everything he had created from nothing. Fred Sterry managed the hotel until 1932, then retired after 27 years of daily operations. He had opened the hotel in 1907 and watched it become the most famous hotel in America under his management. The 3 men who built the plaza were gone. Their hotel remained, operating profitably, hosting presidents and kings, defining what luxury meant in America. Then came October 1943. Conrad Hilton paid $7,400,000 for the Plaza Hotel. through his purchase of both the property and the Atlas Corporation. Hilton had been born in San Antonio, New Mexico on Christmas Day, 1887. His father, Augustus Halverson Hilton, was a Norwegian immigrant. His mother, Mary Genevieve Laufersweiler, was a devout Catholic of German descent. As a boy, Hilton developed entrepreneurial skills working in his father's general store in Socorro County, which was partially converted into a 10-room hotel when the family needed additional income. The experience taught Hilton that hotels could be profitable if managed properly. He attended schools in New Mexico and served a term in the first New Mexico state legislature after statehood in 1912. He was young for the position, but he quickly became disillusioned with the inside deals of politics. By 1913, he had opened the New Mexico State Bank but was considered too young to serve as chief executive officer. He worked as manager instead, learning banking and finance. In 1919, Hilton arrived in Cisco, Texas, intending to buy a bank. The purchase fell through when the price exceeded what he was willing to pay. Instead, he bought the 40-room Mobley Hotel in Cisco for $40,000. The Texas oil boom was underway, and the Mobley did such brisk business that rooms changed hands as often as 3 times a day. Workers coming off 8-hour shifts in the oil fields paid for 8 hours of sleep, then vacated the room for the next shift. Hilton converted the dining room into additional rooms to meet demand. He slept on a cot in his own hotel, working around the clock. The experience taught him that location and timing mattered more than luxury in certain markets. He went on to buy and build hotels throughout Texas. The Dallas Hilton, which opened in 1925, became the first hotel to use the Hilton name. The Abilene Hilton in 1927. The Waco Hilton in 1928, the first hotel with air conditioning in public areas and cold running water. The El Paso Hilton in 1930. Then the Depression hit, and Hilton nearly lost everything. He defaulted on a $300,000 loan in 1931. The Moody family of Galveston, from whom he had borrowed, took possession of his hotels. Hilton worked for them as acting general manager at $18,000 a year, learning to operate in depressed economic conditions. He emerged from the Depression with 5 of his original 8 hotels and all his debts paid by 1937. In 1938, Hilton bought his first hotel outside Texas, the Sir Francis Drake in San Francisco. He expanded west to California and east toward New York, crowning his expansion with the acquisition of the Stevens Hotel in Chicago in 1945, then the world's largest hotel. It was later renamed the Conrad Hilton. In 1943, Hilton purchased both the Roosevelt Hotel and the Plaza in New York City, making Hilton Hotels the first coast-to-coast hotel chain in the United States. The company was incorporated in 1946 as Hilton Hotels Corporation. Hilton International Company followed in 1948, expanding the brand globally. During the 1950s and 60s, Hilton Hotels' worldwide expansion facilitated both American tourism and overseas business by American corporations. It became the world's first international hotel chain. Hilton invested an additional $6 million renovating the Plaza. He removed the brokerage firm of E.F. Hutton from its ground-floor Parkside office, which had been paying $416 per month in rent, a ridiculously low rate for such premium space. Hilton established the Oak Bar in that location, which opened on January 13th, 1945. The Oak Bar would become one of the most famous hotel bars in America. Hilton commissioned artist Everett Shinn to paint 3 murals specifically for the space, works that depicted New York society and theatrical life. The murals became iconic elements of the Oak Bar's identity. A basement storage area that had once been the grill room was converted into the Rendezvous Supper Club, a nightclub that featured live entertainment. Mezzanine writing rooms overlooking the lobby, where guests had once composed letters in quiet alcoves, became private meeting rooms for business executives. During the war years, the hotel enforced a 3-day maximum stay to accommodate more guests and support the war effort. Every room had to turn over regularly to house officers on leave, government officials conducting business in New York, and defense contractors. Hilton made the Plaza profitable again, but he understood something about hotels that Beinecke had not. Hotels were assets to be bought and sold, not monuments to be held forever. The value was in the transaction, not the possession. In 1953, Hilton sold the Plaza to A.M. Sonnabend for approximately $15 million in a sale and leaseback agreement. Hilton needed capital to invest in other properties, including the Waldorf Astoria, which he had recently purchased. The Plaza had served its purpose, generating a profit of over $7 million on the sale. Hilton understood when to let go. A.M. Sonnabend and Hotel Corporation of America took control in 1953. They would hold on for 22 years. The Plaza in 1953 was profitable, prestigious, and beginning to show its age. The building was 46 years old. The systems needed updating. The infrastructure required attention. Hotel Corporation of America, which would later become Sonesta International Hotels, managed the property and operated it through the 1950s and 60s, a period when the hotel reached its cultural peak even as the building itself slowly deteriorated beneath the surface. Paint and polish could hide many problems, but the bones of the structure were aging. Industrial designer Henry Dreyfuss remodeled the Persian Room in the 1950s. The Persian Room, originally designed by Viennese designer Joseph Urban with murals by Lillian Gärtner Palmetto, had become the Plaza's premier nightclub and performance space. It featured stars whose names defined American entertainment. Liberace performed there, his candelabra and sequined costumes filling the room with theatrical excess. Marlene Dietrich brought European sophistication. Eartha Kitt purred through her songs. Carol Channing commanded the stage. Burl Ives sang folk songs. Eddie Duchin played piano. The list went on. Kitty Carlisle, the Mills Brothers, Bob Fosse, Victor Borge, Marge and Gower Champion, Eddie Fisher, Xavier Cugat and his orchestra, the McGuire Sisters, Dinah Shore, Vic Damone, Bob Hope, Robert Goulet, Frankie Lane, Ethel Merman, Henny Youngman. The Persian Room closed in 1978, a victim of changing entertainment tastes and rising costs. A clothing boutique later opened in the space, replacing live performance with retail. Frank Lloyd Wright, the most famous architect in America, moved into Suites 223 through 225 in the 1950s and lived there for 6 years. From 1954 to 1959. Wright was in his 80s and still working on major projects, including the Guggenheim Museum. He held court at the Plaza, receiving clients and journalists in his suite, treating the hotel as his New York office. The association with Wright added cultural prestige even as he occasionally complained about the architecture. Kay Thompson, an entertainer who performed in the Persian Room, lived at the hotel for years. In 1955, she introduced the world to Eloise, the precocious 6-year-old girl who lived at the Plaza with her nanny, her pug dog Weenie, and her turtle Skipperdy. The character appeared first in Thompson's nightclub act, then in a book illustrated by Hilary Knight. Eloise at Christmas time followed. The character became inseparable from the hotel's identity. Eloise was the Plaza's unofficial mascot, the fictional resident who captured something essential about the hotel's tolerance for eccentricity and privilege. February 1964. The Beatles arrived from London on their first visit to America and stayed at the Plaza for 6 days. Security had to hold back thousands of screaming fans who surrounded the hotel. The band gave interviews in their suite. They ordered room service. They experienced their first taste of American celebrity in rooms that had once housed Vanderbilts and Goulds. November 1966. Truman Capote threw his legendary black and white ball in the Grand Ballroom. The party celebrated the success of In Cold Blood and was the social event of the decade. 540 guests attended, each required to wear black and white and a mask. The guest list read like a census of American power and celebrity. Frank Sinatra, Mia Farrow, Tallulah Bankhead, Norman Mailer, Andy Warhol, the Kennedys, the Rockefellers, CBS chairman William Paley. Capote had transformed a hotel ballroom into the site of his personal triumph. May 1954. Patricia Kennedy married British film star Peter Lawford at the Plaza. Her brothers John, Robert, and Ted Kennedy attended. John would be elected president 6 years later. The wedding connected Hollywood, politics, and American aristocracy in the way only a Plaza wedding could. The hotel hosted presidents, hosted weddings, hosted the moments that defined American high society. Each event added another layer to the hotel's mystique. In 1969, the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission designated the plaza's exterior as a landmark. The Landmarks Preservation Commission's designation report stated that the building occupied one of the finest sites in the city and was the most elegant of the great New York hotels. The boldness of mass and good scale of the 18-story white brick and marble structure made the plaza the outstanding example of American hotel architecture of the first decade of the 20th century. The designation protected the facade from demolition or significant alteration, but it did not protect the interior, and it did not guarantee the hotel's ability to function profitably. The hotel was also added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1978, the New York State Register of Historic Places in 1980, and designated a National Historic Landmark in 1986. It remains the only hotel in New York City to receive National Historic Landmark status. The designations brought prestige in tourism, but they also brought restrictions on what could be changed and how renovations could be conducted. By the 1970s, the 800-plus rooms were becoming impossible to maintain at five-star standards. The infrastructure was aging. Plumbing needed replacement. Electrical systems required updating. The costs were mounting faster than revenue could cover them. The landmark designation made renovations more expensive because any work had to preserve historic character. In 1975, Westin International Hotels purchased the plaza from Hotel Corporation of America for $25 million. Westin had previously owned the Savoy Plaza Hotel until it was demolished in 1964 to make way for the General Motors building. The irony was not lost on preservationists. Westin had allowed one landmark to be destroyed, and now they owned another. The new owners renamed the property the Westin Plaza in 1981 and invested in restoration efforts, trying to halt the slow decay. The Rambush Company, specialists in historic restoration, was hired to restore the Oak Room and bar. The work required months and substantial expense. Westin purchased Everett Shin's 3 murals for $1 million. The murals had not been part of the original sale decades earlier and had to be reacquired. Cinema 3, a 204-seat theater, opened in the basement in 1977, capitalizing on the art house cinema trend. Through the late 1970s, the plaza made a net profit again. The landmark designation brought prestige. Tour buses stopped outside. Tourists filled the Palm Court for tea, willing to pay premium prices to sit where the Vanderbilts had sat. The location remained unmatched. The history was valuable in ways that could not be quantified easily. But by the late 1980s, Westin was losing money. The costs of maintaining a 70-year-old building to modern standards while preserving its historic character proved impossible to balance. The parent company, Allegius Corporation, announced its intent to sell the plaza in 1987. At least 150 investors expressed interest. The plaza remained the most famous hotel in New York, perhaps in America, but fame did not guarantee profitability. In January 1988, the plaza was transferred to the Aoki Corporation and Robert M. Bass as part of a larger transaction involving the entire Westin chain. 2 months later, the deal was complete. And then in March 1988, Donald Trump made an offer they could not refuse. Trump said he had not purchased a building, he had purchased a masterpiece, the Mona Lisa. For the first time in his life, he claimed, he had made a deal that was not economic because he could never justify the price he paid, no matter how successful the plaza became. The statement was meant to convey passion, but it revealed something more troubling. Trump had overpaid, and he knew it. The price was $390 million. Some accounts put it as high as $407.5 million. Trump borrowed extensively from multiple banks to complete the purchase. Citibank provided much of the financing. Manufacturer's Hanover Trust Company participated. The debt structure was complex and leveraged, relying on Trump's ability to increase the hotel's revenue substantially and quickly. Title transferred in July 1988. Trump now owned the most famous hotel in New York, and he owed banks hundreds of millions of dollars. Trump appointed his wife Ivana as president of the plaza. Her salary was famously $1 per year plus all the dresses she could buy. The arrangement was presented as charming, but Ivana took the position seriously. She arrived at the hotel early and stayed late, reviewing operations, meeting with department heads, inspecting rooms. She had managed the Trump Castle Casino in Atlantic City and understood hospitality operations better than her husband did. She hired new staff, implemented new standards, and tried to restore the plaza to five-star status after years of underinvestment by Westin. The couple announced a major renovation program that ultimately cost approximately $50 million. The work involved restoring the lobby to its original grandeur, gilding surfaces that had been painted over, replacing worn carpets throughout the building, and reupholstering furniture in the public spaces. When the lobby carpeting was removed for the film Home Alone 2 in December 1991, workers discovered old tile work with the Plaza logo that had been concealed for decades beneath layers of carpet. Trump decided not to replace the carpet. The exposed tile became a new feature, marketed as a restoration of original elements. Trump closed Trader Vic's in the basement in 1989, calling it tacky. The Polynesian-themed restaurant had operated for years, serving Mai Tais and poo-poo platters to tourists who enjoyed the kitsch. Trump replaced it with a Japanese restaurant called Shogun, believing Japanese cuisine would attract a wealthier clientele. The bet did not pay off. Shogun never achieved the popularity Trader Vic's had enjoyed. Onyx was installed in every bathroom. Custom-cut Italian marble-covered floors. Gold-plated fixtures replaced chrome. A large fitness center was created on an upper floor, complete with state-of-the-art equipment and personal trainers. New crystal chandeliers were installed in the grand ballroom, replacing fixtures that had been maintained for decades. Trump wanted everything to sparkle, to photograph well, to impress. The renovations generated publicity, which Trump converted into marketing. The hotel made a modest profit for about 2 years after Trump's purchase, largely from increased occupancy driven by the publicity surrounding the Trump name, higher suite rates that Trump imposed immediately, and more banquet bookings for weddings and corporate events. But Trump had borrowed extensively, and the hotel's operating income was several $million below the break-even point needed to service the debt. The arithmetic was unforgiving. The hotel earned approximately $25 million annually in operating income. The debt service on $400 million borrowed at prevailing interest rates required more than $40 million annually. The gap could not be closed through operational improvements alone. The debt grew to $600 million as Trump borrowed more to cover shortfalls and fund additional renovations. Banks grew nervous. Trump's casino operations in Atlantic City were also struggling. The Taj Mahal Casino, which opened in 1990, was cannibalizing revenue from Trump's other Atlantic City properties rather than attracting new gamblers. The entire Trump organization was over-leveraged. The plaza became a symbol of the problem, a trophy asset that looked impressive but generated insufficient cash flow to justify its cost. On December 20th, 1993, Trump married actress Marla Maples in the Grand Ballroom. He had divorced Ivana in 1992 after his affair with Maples became public. The wedding ceremony was lavish, attended by celebrities and politicians, covered by tabloids. Howard Stern served as best man. The guest list included over 1,000 people. The irony was heavy. Trump was celebrating his second marriage in a hotel he could no longer afford, throwing an extravagant party while banks circled. The marriage would not last. Neither would Trump's ownership of the plaza. By 1994, Trump was desperately looking for a buyer before Citibank and other creditors could force a sale that would wipe out his investment entirely. One of his executives identified Hong Kong-based Sun Hung Kai Properties as a potential buyer. Initial discussions seemed promising. The deal fell through when the Hong Kong developers conducted due diligence and discovered the true state of the hotel's finances. Meanwhile, the creditors had identified Singaporean developer Kwek Ling Beng as a likely buyer. Kwek's company, City Developments Limited, offered to take over the creditors' ownership stake. Saudi Prince Al-Walid bin Talal was also interested. Al-Walid had made billions through investments in Citibank, Apple, and other American companies. He understood trophy real estate and was willing to accept lower returns if the property carried prestige. By March 1995, Al-Walid and City Developments had raised $325 million for a controlling stake. They would split ownership while reducing the debt substantially. Trump sold the controlling stake to Kwek and Al-Walid in April 1995. The price was $325 million. He had paid $390 million 7 years earlier, possibly as much as $407.5 million. The loss was approximately $83 million, possibly more. As part of the transaction, the hotel's debt was reduced to $25 million. The banks took losses. Quek and Al Walid each bought a 42% stake. Citibank received the other 16% to prevent Trump from intervening in the sale. Trump retained a management contract that allowed him to keep his name associated with the property for a few more years, but his ownership was effectively over. For 5 years. The partnership between City Developments and Prince Al Walid worked remarkably well. Operating income reached nearly $46 million by the end of the decade. The plaza was highly profitable in the late 1990s. The economy was booming. Tourism to New York was at record levels. The dot-com bubble created a new class of wealthy technology executives who stayed at the plaza when visiting New York. Banquet bookings filled the calendar. The hotel was performing exactly as it should. And then September 11th, 2001 changed everything. The attacks on the World Trade Center devastated the New York City tourism industry. Air travel plummeted. International visitors canceled trips. Corporate events were postponed indefinitely. Hotels across the city saw occupancy rates collapse. The plaza's operating profits decreased drastically. Revenue that had been $46 million annually fell to $30 million, then lower. Quek and Al Walid found themselves unable to refurbish the hotel as they had planned. The building needed work. 800 rooms were too many to maintain at 5-star levels, especially with reduced revenue. The infrastructure required constant attention. Systems installed in 1907 had been patched and repaired for decades, but they could not function forever. The costs never stopped, but the revenue had. In 2004, Quek and Al Walid sold the Plaza Hotel for $675 million to Elad Properties, an Israeli development firm run by billionaire Yitzhak Tshuva. The price had doubled since 1995, which seemed remarkable until the terms became clear. The sale was predicated on Elad's ability to convert much of the hotel into condominiums and retail space. The value was not in operating a hotel. The value was in transforming the property into something else. Elad immediately announced plans to add residential and commercial units to the property, converting a significant portion of the hotel into luxury apartments and retail space. The plan was controversial from the moment it became public. Hotel unions opposed removing hotel rooms because it would eliminate union jobs. Preservationists opposed converting restaurant spaces to stores because it would damage the hotel's historic character. The landmark designation protected certain public interiors, specifically the Grand Ballroom, Palm Court, Oak Room, Oak Bar, Edwardian Room, and the 2 main lobbies. But much of the building could be altered. Guest rooms were not protected. Service areas were not protected. Upper floors could be converted to residential use. After more than 60 hours of negotiations and discussions, Elad and the unions reached an agreement on April 14, 2005. Elad would convert fewer units to apartments than originally planned while preserving more of the hotel suites. The unions accepted job losses in exchange for severance packages and retraining programs. Preservationists accepted some commercial changes in exchange for landmark protection being extended to additional interior spaces. 2 weeks later, the plaza closed its doors for the first time in 98 years. April 30th, 2005. The Plaza Hotel closed. The last guests checked out. The staff was laid off. The building stood empty for the first time since October 1st, 1907. The renovation cost $450 million, 36 times the original construction cost when adjusted for inflation. Elad hired Mickey Naftali as president and CEO to oversee the transformation. Naftali was an Israeli developer who understood luxury real estate in New York. He later explained that it was impossible to deliver 5-star service with more than 800 rooms. The ratio of staff to guests became unsustainable at that scale. The infrastructure could not support it. The costs exceeded what room rates could generate. The plaza needed to become smaller to become more exclusive, more profitable, more sustainable. The 805 hotel rooms became 282 hotel rooms and suites, plus 181 private residential condominiums. Everything not covered by landmark protection was gut renovated. Walls came down. New systems were installed. Electrical wiring was replaced throughout the building. Plumbing was updated to modern standards. HVAC systems were redesigned to serve fewer rooms more efficiently. The landmark spaces, including the Grand Ballroom, Palm Court, Oak Room, Oak Bar, Edwardian Room, and the two main lobbies, were meticulously restored under the supervision of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. The Palm Court's stained glass ceiling was brought back to its original condition, each panel cleaned and repaired by specialists. The caryatids were restored. The mosaic floor was cleaned and missing tiles replaced with custom-made replacements that matched the original patterns. An underground luxury retail mall was added beneath the hotel, accessible from the basement level, featuring high-end boutiques and restaurants. The Todd English Food Hall opened in the basement, offering gourmet food in a market-style setting. In 2008, HSBC provided a $48,400,000 refinancing that allowed Elad to complete the project. The investment was staggering, but the returns appeared promising. The condominiums sold quickly. Fairmont Hotels and Resorts began managing the hotel in 2005 and continues today. Fairmont had experience operating luxury properties and understood how to serve wealthy guests in intimate settings. The Plaza reopened on March 1, 2008, offering a new hybrid model, part luxury hotel, part residential palace. The hotel portion occupied the lower floors. The residential condominiums occupied the upper floors. Some units were condo hotel units, meaning they could be rented out when owners were not in residence, generating income while maintaining the option for personal use. The condominiums sold for $10 million to tens of millions each, making the upper floors of the Plaza some of the most expensive residential real estate in New York. The Vanderbilt suite sold for over $20 million. Penthouses exceeded $50 million. Buyers included foreign oligarchs, American executives, celebrities who wanted a New York address with unmatched prestige. The sales generated enormous profits for Elad. Prince Al-Walid bought back into the property, purchasing a 50% interest in the hotel portion and a 25% interest in the condo hotel units from Elad. He had made money on his first Plaza investment and was willing to invest again, believing the transformation had solved the profitability problem. The Oak Room restaurant closed in 2011, a victim of changing dining preferences and rising costs. The space that had hosted George M. Cohan and generations of New York society was converted to event space. Elad had made substantial money on the renovation and sale of residential units. The transformation had been successful financially. In 2012, having extracted maximum value, they sold their controlling stake. In July 2012, Elad sold a 75% controlling stake in the Plaza to Sahara India Pariwar for $570 million. The Indian conglomerate was already experiencing legal issues when it bought the hotel. The chairman, Subrata Roy, was facing investigations in India over fundraising practices that regulators claimed violated securities laws. The problems would only get worse, and the Plaza would suffer for it. Sahara India Pariwar was run by Subrata Roy, a flamboyant billionaire chairman who projected an image of success and power. The company had diverse holdings across real estate, finance, media, and sports. Roy also owned the Dream Downtown Hotel in New York and the Grosvenor House in London. He lived lavishly, traveling by private jet, hosting elaborate parties, presenting himself as a global business titan. But beneath the surface, the company was already selling off properties when it purchased the Plaza. Financial troubles in India were mounting. Regulators were investigating. The empire was shakier than it appeared. In 2014, Subrata Roy was jailed in New Delhi for fraud. Sahara had failed to repay billions of dollars raised through what prosecutors called dirty bonds, investment instruments that violated Indian securities laws. Roy had collected money from millions of small investors, promising high returns, and used the funds for real estate purchases and other ventures. The Supreme Court of India ruled that the fundraising was illegal and ordered Sahara to repay over $31 billion. Roy could not pay. He was imprisoned, held in Tihar jail in New Delhi until he could arrange repayment. He would spend years in custody, occasionally released on parole to attend to business matters, then returned when payment deadlines were missed. The Plaza's financial performance collapsed under Sahara's ownership. In 2012, before the legal troubles became overwhelming, the hotel's net income was $3,670,000. The property was performing adequately under professional management. By 2014, net income had turned negative, $1,200,000 lost. The hotel was bleeding cash. By 2017, the hotel was losing $10 million annually. The losses were catastrophic. Sahara spent $145 million on additional restorations to the Palm Court, Rose Club, and Champagne Bar, and on renovating condominiums. They poured money into a property that was hemorrhaging cash, unable to stop the decline. Roy announced in 2014 that he was seeking a buyer for his company's stake in the hotel. The Sultan of Brunei made an unsuccessful bid of $680 million. The price was high, and the Sultan's representatives conducted due diligence. What they discovered frightened them away. Pra Michel from the Fugees, the hip-hop group, and Miami entrepreneur David Sugarman attempted to buy the hotel from Roy for $2.2 billion. The price was absurd, far beyond any rational valuation. That deal also failed when financing could not be arranged. In 2017, Sahara hired the real estate firm JLL to broker a sale, desperate to find a buyer, before the losses destroyed what value remained. Legal complications multiplied. Prince Al Walid and Ashkenazi Acquisition Corporation, which held a 12.5% stake in the property, sued Sahara over interference with the sale process. The minority owners claimed that Sahara was negotiating sales on terms that violated their rights and excluded them from negotiations. The Saudis and the minority owners demanded that Sahara sell to them at the same terms being offered to other buyers, exercising their right of first refusal. Sahara disputed the accusations, claiming they had followed all legal requirements. The battles played out in New York State Supreme Court, while the hotel continued to lose money. Every month of litigation was another month of losses. In July 2018, the Qataris paid $600 million for 100% ownership, buying out all parties and settling the legal disputes. They were buying a trophy property with a curse attached. Qatar Hospitality is backed by the Qatar Investment Authority, the sovereign wealth fund of one of the richest nations on earth. Qatar's wealth comes from natural gas reserves, and the sovereign wealth fund manages hundreds of billions of dollars in assets. They own hotels around the world, from Paris to London to Singapore. They will need every dollar of that backing for the plaza. The hotel requires constant maintenance. The landmark designation means that repairs must be done according to historic preservation standards, which are slower and more expensive than conventional construction. Historic building constraints mean renovations require approval from the Landmarks Preservation Commission, adding time and cost to every project. The landmark protections that saved the Grand Ballroom and Palm Court from demolition also limit what can be changed when systems fail. Modern HVAC requirements conflict with historic aesthetics. Energy efficiency improvements must be balanced against preserving original windows and walls. The hotel closed temporarily in March 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic, the first full closure since 2005. New York City became an epicenter of the pandemic. Tourism evaporated overnight. Business travel ceased. The plaza sat empty for months. It reopened in 2021 with enhanced safety protocols, plexiglass barriers in public areas, reduced capacity in restaurants, contact tracing systems. The pandemic reinforced what every owner had learned. The plaza's profitability depends on continuous operation at high occupancy with premium rates. Any disruption destroys the economics. The pattern is clear when you trace it from the beginning. Bernhard Beinecke built it and died there. Harry Black lived on the 18th floor and killed himself. Conrad Hilton made money, then sold it before it could turn on him. A.M. Sonnabend held on for 22 years and left as the building aged beyond what renovations could fix. Westin bought it and lost money trying to maintain 800 rooms to five-star standards. Trump lost $83 million trying to make the numbers work through publicity and gilding. City Developments and Prince Al Walid made money until September 11th destroyed tourism, then sold before the recovery failed. Elad made money on the conversion by transforming it into something other than a pure hotel, then got out. Sahara's chairman went to jail for fraud, while the hotel lost $10 million a year under absentee ownership. Now the Qataris own it, backed by sovereign wealth but facing the same constraints that defeated everyone else. What destroys plaza owners is not a single catastrophe. It is the accumulation of costs over time. $450 million renovations are required every few decades just to maintain the building to modern luxury standards. The staff must be enormous to maintain five-star service. A hotel with 282 rooms requires nearly as much staff as one with 800 rooms, because the public spaces demand the same level of service regardless of room count. The Grand Ballroom requires a full events team. The Palm Court requires experienced servers. The kitchens require skilled chefs. The lobby requires doormen, concierges, bellmen. The landmark protections prevent demolition, but also prevent the kinds of modifications that might make the property profitable through increased density or reduced maintenance costs. The hotel is too expensive to maintain, too historic to demolish, and too famous to fail quietly. Most historic hotels were torn down or converted entirely to other uses when the economics no longer worked. The original Waldorf Astoria, which Hardenberg had designed, was demolished in 1929 to build the Empire State Building. The Savoy Plaza, designed by Warren and Wetmore, became the General Motors Building in 1964. The Murray Hill Hotel, once owned by Beinecke, was demolished. The Manhattan Hotel, which Beinecke built, is gone. Nearly every contemporary of the plaza has vanished. The plaza remains trapped between preservation and profitability, between its past and any possible future. The landmark designation ensures it will never be demolished, but the designation does not ensure profitability. Every owner who thought money alone would be enough discovered something the plaza teaches slowly. The building demands more than capital, and it consumes everything given to it. The plaza remains. Its owners do not. That has been true since October 1st, 1907. Today, the Palm Court serves afternoon tea at $50 per person, not including gratuities or additional items. The Grand Ballroom hosts weddings that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Condominiums on the upper floors sell for tens of millions of dollars when they come to market. Fairmont manages the daily operations under contract. The Qatar Investment Authority owns the deed. 282 hotel rooms occupy the space where 805 once stood. The retail mall in the basement draws tourists who cannot afford to stay upstairs, but want to say they visited the plaza. The building at the corner of Fifth Avenue and Central Park South stands exactly as it did when it opened. At least from the outside, white brick and marble, 18 stories, a French chateau on American soil. 1,650 chandeliers still hang from the ceilings. The stained glass in the Palm Court still filters afternoon light. Bernhard Beinecke arrived in New York in 1865 with nothing. Within 40 years, he controlled the city's largest stockyard and built the most elegant hotel in America. He died in his apartment there in 1932, age 86, surrounded by everything he had created. The plaza remains. Beinecke does not. That pattern held for Harry Black, who built monuments across America and killed himself at 66. It held for Conrad Hilton, who understood when to sell. It held for Donald Trump, who lost $83 million chasing prestige. It held for the Indian conglomerate whose chairman went to jail for fraud. It held for every partnership that thought their money would be different, that their management would succeed where others failed. Nothing unimportant ever happens at the plaza. That was the promise when the doors opened in 1907. What actually happened was this. The plaza became the most famous hotel in the world, and it achieved that fame through a century of consuming the fortunes of everyone who believed they could own it. The hotel was built with $12.5 million in 1907. Another $450 million was spent in 2008. The Qataris paid $600 million in 2018. The numbers keep growing. The pattern never changes. The plaza endures. Its owners do not.